Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about a key question about the stories we craft. And it's a question. So here's the question. I'm gonna pose a question to you, then I'm going to frame it, and then I'm going to answer it from the perspective of a dungeon master, and then I'm going to ask you what you think. Right? All right. So here we go. All right. Here's the question. When we present, let's talk about magic systems, right? So we have Vancian magic from Dungeons and Dragons, but we're going to tweak it, right? We're gonna change it a little bit, right? Because we were invited to by Gary Gygax, page 4 of the Dungeons and Dragons of the Dungeon Master Guide right now. The rules aren't in charge, you're in charge. That that structure, that frame, right? That we are called to as Dungeon Masters, that comes straight from Gary Gygax, okay? So basically, we're going to structure a magic system, right? And so here's the question. When we structure a magic system, right, when we're adding to and adjusting Vancian magic, because that's the fundamental first layer of Dungeons & Dragons, Dungeons & Dragons magic system, right? And kind of like, lower tier dungeon masters just run it straight out of the PHP and the DMG. But any dungeon master worth their salt is going to, they're going to tweak it, right? And so you need to build a magic system. Now, we've all been told, Brandon Sanders, he just made $40 million, right? Kickstarting a brand new book. And he'll tell you, when you create a magic system, it needs to be consistent. You as the author have to know how it works, right? And so I went to PhilCon, right? And PhilCon's brilliant. I love PhilCon. And PhilCon 2022, it's in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and it's primarily a science fiction authors convention, okay? But they have these amazing panels, and you have these authors discussing these incredibly important topics, right? Now, everything that these authors are discussing is the same as what we're doing as dungeon masters. It's just less important. Authors are less important than dungeon masters today, and the reason why is they use an antiquated storytelling model, right? They're like, oh, let me scroll 300 pages of whatever's in my head, and maybe an editor went over it, and then I'm going to kick it out to everybody, right? It's pablum. It's nothing compared to a Dungeons & Dragons story, because a Dungeons & Dragons story is crafted second by second to meet the needs of every single person at the table. So authors are really antiquated storytellers, right? They're like, what they do is just less important than what we do as dungeon masters. Vastly less important, less valuable, but similar. Okay, it is very similar to what we do. There's no question about that. That is correct. It is very similar to what we do, just less important and less valuable. Okay, all right. So, but they brought forward some great questions, right? Now we're going to answer the same question. It's just more important when we answer it, right? Because people, we can impact people, we can change people, right? Whereas novels can do that and books can do that, but to a much less powerful effect, much less powerful impact than Dungeons & Dragons can change lives quickly. I think books can still change lives, just very slowly and far less valuably, right? Less quickly, less impact, less overall, right? Yeah, okay. So here we go. All right. So here's the question, right? So they said there was one of these guys in the panel, like just parroting whatever he heard from whatever person was, breaking down Brandon Sanderson. I love Brandon Sanderson. His work is awesome. But here's the point. They were like, your magic needs to be consistent, all right? And it needs to be a hard system. You have to know the rules as the dungeon master. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be logical, right? And I was like, and so I asked this question to the group, and the reason why I asked the question is one of the authors said, not like J.K. Rowling, 17 Canutes equals a quasarball, right? Like, and just kind of like talk through, like, I think it's like there's like 17 Canutes to a galleon, and then one galleon equals 4 Drazabals, whatever it is, right? She actually has a money system for the wizards, and people have mocked her for this. They're like, that doesn't make any logical sense, right? They would just use regular money, or wizards wouldn't even need money because they can do whatever spells and they can create whatever they want. So it doesn't make any logical sense that wizards would have money, right? Now, pay attention. Here's this is for the big brains. Let's go. All right. A dude just won the Nobel Peace Prize a couple years ago, and all he had to do to win the Nobel Peace Prize was just say, we have been building financial infrastructure and financial models and financial instruments for decades based on the idea that people use money logically. That is a fallacy. People do not use money logically. They use money completely irrationally, right? And he won a Nobel Peace Prize, right? And these like entire governments have been structuring that we use money rationally, right? And so so I asked the group, I was like, wait a second. If you're saying to build a logical magical system, right? And then you're mocking Harry, and I was a little nicer with the question, but this is the question. But you're mocking J.K. Rowling for this illogical, economic aspect within her world, right? When you're building a logical magic system, are you just projecting your hope, or are you actually projecting what magic would look like in the IRL, right? Because the reality is, we live in a world right now, right, where cash is actually less valuable than a long string of numbers. Even with the recent cuts, a single Bitcoin is worth 16,000 paper dollars. That makes no logical sense. People were still buying Dogecoin when it was virtually worthless. People just got rooked for billions in FTX, right? And so our economic system is completely illogical and irrational. So when you come and you squawk your nice sounding pablum noise of you need a consistent logical magic system, are you just projecting your desires for the world to be consistent and logical onto your fantasy world? And your fantasy world is the stupid world because it doesn't actually reflect the IRL. You see where I'm going? Right? And so I was nicer in my question, but that was my question. And now I'm going to answer my question to you, right? And so, and I'm not even going to give you the PhilCon answer because because what they did with the guy who I asked the question to actually didn't say anything for 10 seconds while I was thinking, and then he just sat out, crapped out some something he had read in some magazine, or that you hear in 5 different panels, right? Whenever you get these panelists, right, they're always like, oh, there's something I desperately want to say because it's my hobby horse, or they're like, oh, I'll say this clever thing I heard in 4 other panels, or oh, let me drop this brilliance on you, right? And this answer wasn't brilliant. It was just a patent, like people will say all kinds of things in these panels. They're like, oh, it's the difference between a pantser and an outliner. You hear it in 50 different panels. You're just like, shut up, next. Just go to the, can you stop repeating what you've heard? Just say a real answer. And one of the reasons why I go is a third of the time, the things everybody say have never been said by anybody else and are absolutely brilliant, right? But it's hard to get panelists, right? And so, good ones. And a lot of times it's just a repeat, or it's just like the person just saying the thing that you care about the most, they're most passionate about, and you've heard them say it in 15 other panels, especially if you've been on year after year, right? And so if you are a panelist, say something unique, say something brilliant, right? Or pass to the next person if you ain't got nothing useful to say, right? And if you ain't got much useful, then maybe you should be thinking about whether you should be a panelist or not, right? So here's my answer. Actually, I think we do, if we're going to be creating magic worlds, I think we need to start breaking from Brandon Sanderson and realize what Sanderson is doing is very comfortable to watch, to read, but it doesn't reflect IRL. Our IRL world is not based on rationality, and it is not based on logic. It is upside down whirlybird world. And so the reality is, so you can create your little logical, consistent magic system, but don't pretend that it reflects the IRL. It reflects your desire of how the IRL is. That's my take. What do you think? What's your answer to the question? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.